Good morning. My name is Jason Ishii, Chairperson of the Authority. I'd like to call to order the April 3rd, 2024 Kakaako Authority meeting for the Hawaii Community Development Authority. And the time is now 10:03.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, the Hawaii Community Development Authority is holding today's Kakaako Board meeting virtually on Zoom. The Zoom link details were included on the meeting agenda. Therefore, members of the public are welcome to join us on Zoom and, and also at our physical meeting site, the American Brewery Building, 547 Queen Street, second floor boardroom, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96813. The HCDA communication staff is hosting this meeting. Once this meeting begins, everyone will be muted for clearer audio. Board members, if you have any comments or questions, please unmute yourselves to speak. It is important that all individuals clearly state their name each time prior to speaking. This is a public in-person and virtual meeting, so to prevent any distractions, if you're attending virtually and you are not a board member, staff member, or HCDA's Attorney General, please turn off your video during the meeting. If you wish to provide oral testimony and you are attending virtually, please indicate so by clicking the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. If you are attending in person, you will be called to the front of the room in the order that you signed up. All testimony will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Your testimony must be related to an item on the agenda. Before you begin your testimony, we ask that you identify yourself and spell your name for the record. When 1 minute is remaining, 1 minute remains will be called out. And when 30 seconds is remaining, 30 seconds remain will be called out. When time has elapsed, time will be called out, after which you will have 30 seconds to conclude your testimony, and then your audio will be turned off. If you are attending in person, the presiding officer will call the next testifier. Keep in mind that this is an opportunity to share your thoughts with us. If you ask questions during your testimony, neither the board nor the staff is required to provide an answer. If the authority's connection for the remote meeting is lost, the meeting will be recessed until the connection is restored. If the connection cannot be restored within 30 minutes, the meeting will be terminated and the authority will continue the meeting at another notice date. Thank you. Chair.
ACDA board members, please remain visible and audible during the meeting. Also, please acknowledge you're present by either saying here or present. Let the record reflect that the following members are present. Vice Chair Higa.
Present.
Secretary Apo.
Present.
Member Miranda Johnson.
Present.
Member Anderson.
Present.
Member Strikes.
Present.
Member Evans.
Present.
And Member Sakota.
Present.
Chair, we have quorum.
For today's meeting, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments after agenda item has been presented. Individuals from the public who have requested to provide verbal public testimony on a specific agenda item are on standby and will be permitted to provide their testimony respectively. First thing on the agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes of March 6, 2024. Board members, are there any comments or corrections to these minutes? If there are no comments or corrections, the minutes are approved as presented. Item number 2, decision making. Consider authorizing the executive director to amend general lease number 19-01 effective August 1st, 2019 with the Volunteer Legal Services Hawaii for the commercial office space located at 545 Queen Street, Honolulu, Hawaii, tax map key number 12-1-031-021-0094 to extend the term by an additional 3 years until July 31st, 2027 and increase the rent. Ms. Lindsay Doy-Lieberton, Asset Manager, will now present the staff report. Lindsay?
Good morning, members. This request comes to us from Volunteer Legal Services of Hawaii. They're our lessee just downstairs off Queen Street in our commercial space over at Honuakaha. Their current lease with us expires at the end of July this year. So they're coming to us with an extension request for an additional 3-year term. The 3-year term would have a 3% annual rent increase starting in August of 2025. The rent is just about market value. It's one of our, I guess, more competitive leases that we have. We don't have very many market leases, but this one is definitely one of those. It is a true triple net lease, so they, as our lessee, are responsible for paying maintenance, utilities, insurance, and of course, the common area maintenance fees that are assessed by the Honuakaha AOAO. We do have the executive director of volunteer legal services, Rachel, online if there are any questions specific to their mission. But again, generally, this request is for an amendment of their lease to extend, and then also to do a slight amendment to the termination clauses. Right now, there is a 6-month mutual termination clause. Rachel at Volunteer Legal Services requested a slightly longer notification if HCDA wants to terminate, because of course they would need time to seek alternate office spaces. And then Volunteer Legal Services also requested a 3-month notification should they need to terminate in the event of a building leak or something that would jeopardize their building insurance. So again, if there's any questions, we do have Rachel online.
Members, are there any questions or comments?
Chair,
Member Evans?
this question may be directed to Rachel, but I'll ask you, Lindsay, first. Volunteer Legal Services is a 501c3, I believe. It probably depends on, because its clients are low income, it does not collect enough from them to pay for its expenses, its staff, and its occupancy. I know that they have agreed to the 3% rent increase, but is there a consideration for the fact that they provide a valuable service to our less wealthy households?
That's a great question. We do recognize they actually are a great tenant. You know, they've been our tenant since 1999, so a long time. And we really enjoy having them as our tenant. So we are actually offering the rent to remain stagnant for the next year. So I mentioned their lease would expire July of this year. They wouldn't start paying that 3% annual escalation until August 2025. So essentially that 3% wouldn't kick in for the first year of the extension. And that's just something that, you know, we wanted to offer them in recognition of the work that they do for the low-income population. They utilize volunteer attorneys. So we do think it's a very noteworthy cause that we do support. As far as I think their funding, maybe if Rachel wanted to speak on that, because I'm not too familiar as to how they you know, pay for things, but I do know that budgets are tight. Let's see if we have Rachel online. I don't know if she.
I think actually you've answered my question,
Oh, okay,
Lindsay.
okay.
And, you know, just the fact that they feel comfortable that they can handle that 3%, at least with the, you know, willingness on the agency to give them, you know, that year to start budgeting and obtaining the additional funds. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And Member Evans, I just wanted to note too, and I don't think you were the board at that time, but during the pandemic, this board, in recognition of, you know, the work that Volunteer Legal Services does and did, I think the board authorized us to waive their rent.
Yeah.
During the pandemic. I think Volunteer Legal Services was very grateful for that because of course they were having a hard time, you know, access to, you know, the services was limited. So they were struggling with that. So we did, this board was generous enough to allow that, what was not a deferral, it was
A
a waiver.
waiver, yeah, because their funding sources too from ledge and from, fundraisers, nobody was having, big fundraisers, so their funding dramatically decreased as well.
Thank you for that, Executive Director, and thank you, Lindsay. I didn't know that, and I very much appreciate that that was a step that the board took.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have one question. It's Kevin Sakota for Rachel.
Yes, Member Scott.
Okay, good morning, Rachel. How do you, we've been through some kind of wild times going through COVID and now with the Maui issues, everything like that. But how are you measuring how much your services are in demand? Like, is there a count of the number of people that you're helping kind of each year, like since 2019? Is it escalating?
To Maui specifically, or?
No, to just
In general,
the whole operation.
yes, and yes, overall, and also to Maui.
So how much is it growing? Is it growing like 10% a year or 20% a year in terms of people requesting your assistance?
Well, there's people requesting and people qualifying. Because that's
Okay.
two different things too. So we have had an increase in calls. It did go up. I only started a couple years ago, but did go
Okay.
up during that time during the pandemic. And I know it was difficult for people to reach out to us for services, and so there was a balance. I wouldn't say 20%. I would probably go more with 10. But I will comment on the funding too. They're correct. We didn't have any funding for state at all for a few years, so we were struggling. And we're hoping with Maui this year, it's with the ledge refocusing, as you know, that we won't have a problem. Did I answer your question?
To some extent. I guess I'm looking
Okay.
at it from actually your ability to market your services to the legislature to get funding. I mean, my sense is that there's a greater demand for your services because legal expenses are so generally high, and for the lower income population, it's really confusing, I think, going forward with all the sort of bureaucracy and the red tape that you have to go through.
Okay. We have a certain amount of our own red tape too. We want to make sure that we're only serving the level of income that we advertise and that we tell the ledge. So we have to be careful too. Even though we do make exceptions for veterans, seniors, and people who are disabled. But I mean, I do have numbers if you ever want them. I can actually generate a spreadsheet if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Is there any public testimony on this matter?
No, Chair.
If not, is there a motion for the board to authorize the executive director to amend the general lease number 19-01, effective August 1st, 2019, with the Volunteer Legal Services of Hawaii for the commercial office space located at 545 Queen Street, Honolulu, Hawaii, tax map key number 12-1-031 0210094 to extend the term by an additional 3 years to July 31st, 2027, and increase the rent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Uh,
Member Higa, seconded.
Moved by Member Evans, seconded by Vice Chair Higa. Members, are there any further discussions on the motion? If not, Lindsay, can you please take the roll call?
Members, the motion has been made and seconded. On that motion, Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Higa,
Yes.
Member Uphold,
Yes, with an exclamation point.
Member Miranda Johnson,
Yes.
Member Straits,
Yes.
Member Anderson,
Yes.
Member Sakota,
Yes.
and Chair Ishii.
Yes.
Motion passes with 8 in favor.
All right, next thing on the agenda is the executive director report, monthly report, and other status reports.
Thank you, Chair. The Executive Director's report is located at tab 3. In the interest of time, I want to just summarize one particular thing kind of related to the conversations on the the legislative matters of the budget. So on page 3 of the Executive Director's report, just want to note that another congressionally directed spending request that we submitted to Senator Hirono's office on behalf of us, ACDA and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is to ask for $3 million to be used for planning and designing the bulkhead and wharf repairs for that Fisherman's Wharf area. And this was in recognition that, we may or may not get all of the 20 million, or we need to supplement, the 20 million by the state legislature. And we also note that because the Regent Sea Glider folks are based in part in DC, they've met with Senator Hirono's staff and already kind of answered some questions about, the Sea Glider project in general. And that has seemed to go pretty well. So again, we're trying to look at alternative ways to fund these infrastructure projects, and show that, we can go out and get alternative sources of funding to supplement what the legislature gives us. But I think this is just a start, and then through the efforts of Kara, Kimura, and Mark, I think and Ryan, we're also going to look at other kinds of funding that we can leverage to pay for the repairs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other questions in regards to the Executive Director's report?
Yeah, Member Apo has a question.
Yes, Member Paul.
Yes. Craig, can you explain the jurisdictional line between overwater and the pier itself, between state jurisdiction and then Kewalo, as I understand it, is one of those that's privately as the Howard Hughes has jurisdiction, and the harbor master comes under Howard Hughes. But there is a dividing line between state responsibility and is that, can you explain how that works? When it comes to having to, where repairs actually affect both over water and land.
Okay, thanks, Member Paul. And I'll also ask, Lindsay, she might have to supplement this as well. So, originally this Kewalo Basin Harbor was owned by the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation transferred the Kewalo Basin Harbor, small boat harbor, to HCDA. I want to say it was back in the early 2000s sometime, or late 2000s. And, we tried to operate and manage the harbor for a little bit. Managing a harbor, managing boat slips and boaters is not really sort of, in our fortes, so to speak. So we, I think, procured it, did a procurement, and then we had got Alamar to manage the harbor for us, kind of manage the harbor. I don't remember who the harbor master was at the time, but we had Alamar doing it for us. I think Alamar's arrangement ended, so we were then looking for another operator, maintainer for the harbor. I think we had a difficult time finding someone, but Howard Hughes, an affiliate of Howard Hughes, agreed to lease the harbor, the part of the land side, and then they have the water jurisdiction, right, over that. As I kind of recall from history, we had a very difficult time finding an operator to do it, but we really needed to, because, it's not, again, in our forte to manage harbors like that. So we found, the affiliate of Howard Hughes. We entered into a long-term lease with Howard Hughes. There was some, deferred maintenance associated with the harbor. So our arrangement with Howard Hughes was that they were responsible for replacing the floating docks that were in the harbor at the time. And they were in kind of bad shape. So they replaced the floating docks and we were responsible for repairing the wharf near Fisherman's Wharf, not the bulkhead or the land site, because that's OHA's responsibility. But we were responsible to repair the wharf. Now, Howard Hughes did replace the floating docks at a cost of, I want to say in excess of $23 million. They fixed it. We, on the other hand, HCDA, we've been trying to, as I mentioned, we've been going to the legislature for several sessions now to try to get money to repair the wharf, not the wharf or the bulkhead side, but the wharf. And we've been unsuccessful. In fact, a lot of times that request for CIP didn't make it out of sort of the channels of, budget and finance. DBED has to get to the governor. It's just a process. And I think it's a matter of prioritization, not that they didn't care about the repairs, but it was prioritization. So we were responsible for that. In exchange, there's a minimum rent that's payable. And then percentage rent kicks in at a point when Howard Hughes has kind of paid off their, the cost of the floating docks. And we expect percentage rent to kind of kick in maybe in a couple of years, 2026, around there. But member Oposo, we're responsible for really doing the wharf. And I think I've mentioned this before, but it is an obligation that we have not fulfilled on, right, or completed, and we should do it. So that's what we're trying to do is, get the wharf and the bulkhead fixed. And I would note that on this proposed idea of a sea glider port and docking facility at Kewalo, Howard Hughes is in support of it. We've talked to the executives at Howard Hughes, and they've written a support letter in support of this congressionally directed spending request. So it's something that's really needed. You may recall that we probably just talked about it in a executive director report, but the wharf is in such a condition that we couldn't allow any vehicular traffic, and we really didn't want to even have pedestrian traffic. So Lindsay and her staff, through procurement, installed a chain link fence to prevent vehicular access and to prevent pedestrian access onto the wharf, because it was becoming acute, because OHA is now using the land side for like food trucks, and there's more customers and people coming onto the wharf. So we didn't want anybody, going onto the wharf. So that's the sort of the history, member Apo.
Chair.
So, one last question. Now, that wharf area, as I understand it, is not intended for permanent mooring, correct? That area is reserved for boats moving in and out. And part of the permanent mooring is that the tide that comes in there creates some problems in permanent mooring there.
So, that wharf area that's, was the old Fisherman's Wharf. I don't know if mooring is not allowed. What we did have to do though, when we saw the fence, we asked Howard Hughes not to allow any vessels to tie up over there because we were concerned about the condition of harbor. I have noticed, member Apo, that in the past, there were some large vessels that were tied up to that harbor. This is like large yachts. Yeah, not permanent, but transient stuff. So
Chair?
it is allowed.
Chair.
Thank you. You answered my questions.
Thank you.
Member Evans?
Well, I just wanted to add a little context. I was on the board at the time that happened. And it was with, very fortunate for the public, I believe, to have Howard Hughes be willing to make the repairs and manage the harbor for HCDA. Other recreational harbors, member of Poe, haven't been so fortunate. The Department of Transportation did transfer other recreational harbors to DLNR. And the unique circumstances that having a partnership between a well-funded landside neighbor and their willingness to step in hasn't happened with other recreational harbors, and it's been a challenge for the state. So I think this was a very fortunate situation for the public. Thank you, Chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just one more comment. My interest is based on the fact that of all the properties that OHA owns, that lot A, it's referred to as lot, is the highest rated of commercial value. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, as we move forward, that part of the equation, you know, was being addressed. It has nothing to do with fixing it. Of course, fixing it is going to raise the value even more than that. But I'm curious to see how all this plays out in the end as to how that part of the harbor is used.
Thank you. Chair, can I comment
you.
for a little bit
Yes.
and then
Secretary
comment
Director
on,
Nakamoto.
thank you, Member Everett. So, yeah, Member Poe, you know, that Lot A and the potential development that OHA is planning for that is significant. I think in the last maybe 6 or 7 months, Ryan and I have really tried to work with OHA, not trying to work, we are working with OHA. Casey Brown, Tim Wong, the planning director, to look for opportunities like Lot A, the Fisherman's Wharf, the synergies between those two that we can work together to develop. That's why this request for the congressionally directed spending is really structured as kind of although it's coming from HCDA, it's really a joint request for money. Because I told Tim and Casey Brown and others that I think, you know, I think we're stronger united with OHA to look at it. Now, others may think differently, but I believe we're stronger united and together working to get repairs to jointly benefit both HCDA, you know, to get the repairs done on the wharf and to facilitate development on the land side, which could include a wharf and also fixing, you know, the shipyard as a possible maintenance facility for these sea glider vessels, because there's a sort of a, you know, way with the vessels can kind of go up to the dry dock facility. I think the other comment I think Member Everett's true is it is true that at the time that we were looking at an operator for the harbor, we were having a difficult time finding a harbor operator, and I believe we were grateful to get Howard Hughes to come in, and they have synergies too because the harbor's location across the street from a lot of their developments, right? And as far as sort of the transfer of these harbors and the current situation with a lot of recreational harbors, I believe that there's a bill in the legislature right now directed at DLNR that would allow DLNR to enter into these public-private partnerships for some of these small boat recreational harbors. And I think they're looking at Isle of Wight Boat Harbor as one of those possible, you know, public-private partnership opportunities, because I think DLNR recognizes that this kind of public-private partnership that we have with Howard Hughes via lease maybe is the way to go for these small boat, you know, recreational harbors. That's what their thinking is, and I've been approached by Ed Underwood to if we can kind of help out if this bill passes. But that's sort of the bill that's currently going through right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? No. Okay. Is there any public testimony? If not, thank you for those who have joined us on Zoom or in person. This concludes our business for today, and the meeting is now adjourned, and the time is 10:32. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.